I believe personally that the strength of the nation's transportation infrastructure is one of the most important factors that will determine our future economic success. Transportation infrastructure is really the foundation for our economic growth. And I recognize absolutely jobs are created in the private sector, but I also recognize that transportation infrastructure is absolutely critical for the economic competitive position of the United States. So even as we look to cut spending to bring down the deficit, which we absolutely must do, we need to ensure that transportation funding remains a priority. Yes, we have to cut spending. We have to be smart about where we cut. We can't afford to cut areas that are critical to future growth. That would be counterproductive. Investment in transportation can play a critical role in strengthening the economy in the near term, because it is clear that transportation funding in the 2009 Recovery Act did help to create jobs and created jobs here in America, and jobs that help strengthen the nation's economic recovery. It is also clear that there is a tremendous need for further infrastructure investment. According to the World Economic Forum's Global Competitiveness Report, the United States ranks 23rd in the world in the quality of its overall infrastructure. We even rank behind countries like Barbados and Oman. The American Society of Civil Engineers has created a report card on America's infrastructure. They give our infrastructure an overall grade of D. Aviation, they give a D. Bridges, they give a C. Rail, C-. Roads, a D-. Transit, a D. Overall grade of a D from the Civil Engineers of America. The next graph, which was made with data from the President's budget, shows that our combined investment in infrastructure, research and development, and education has fallen as a share of GDP from 6.1% in 1962 to 3.6% in 2012. So as a share of the economy, we are spending a smaller amount on infrastructure and these other critical areas than we did in the 60s. There is widespread agreement on the need for further infrastructure investment. I think it's notable that just last month, Thomas Donahue, the head of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, which represents many of the country's largest businesses, joined Richard Trumka, the head of the AFL-CIO, America's largest union, in testifying before the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee on the need for more infrastructure funding. Here is what Mr. Donahue said. If we don't change course over the next 5 years, the economy could forego as much as $336 billion in lost economic growth as transportation networks continue to deteriorate. I am well aware of the fiscal constraints facing this Congress and the nation, he went on to say, but we must avoid cutting off our nose to spite our face. Without proper investment and attention to our infrastructure, the United States' economic stability, potential for job growth, global competitiveness, and quality of life are all at risk. I think Mr. Donahue has it about right. Here is what the Obama administration has proposed in its budget for transportation. It proposes $556 billion in a 6-year surface transportation reauthorization. This includes $468 billion to rebuild roads, bridges, and transit systems and improve safety, which represents a 60% increase over the previous 6-year authorization bill. It also increases funding for high-speed rail and incorporates rail funding in the Highway Trust Fund. And it creates a national infrastructure bank within the trust fund to leverage federal funds for transportation projects. The budget proposes front-loading $50 billion in transportation funding in 2012 to help boost economic growth. It reclassifies transportation spending as mandatory spending, subjecting it to pay-go rules. And it includes a placeholder for a bipartisan financing solution to be developed between the President and Congress. I'll be interested in hearing more from Secretary LaHood on the administration's ideas in that regard. The reality is that even before we factor in the administration's new transportation request, we already have a very serious shortfall at existing funding levels. Let me repeat that. At existing funding levels, we have a very significant shortfall. This chart shows that Highway Trust Fund receipts are projected to be far lower than Highway Trust Fund outlays in the years ahead. And under the administration's request, the funding gap would be far larger. Now, let me just point out here, the red line is the outlays, the expenditures. The green line is the anticipated Highway Trust Fund receipts. And you can see the gap by the time we get to 2021 is over $28 billion a year. Now that is at the existing levels. So we got a very big problem here to deal with. And we know that the reality of trust fund financing is based on the gasoline tax. Gasoline tax is more and more disconnected from the reality of modern transportation. With electric cars, with hybrids, with renewable fuels, with all the rest that is happening to change the way we transit, we've got a big problem here between the need and the funding mechanism.